It was a normal afternoon at the local gym, the kind where the sound of gloves hitting punching bags echoed off the walls, and the smell of sweat filled the air. People were training, lifting weights, sparring, and pushing themselves to the limit. The fighters were loud, confident, full of energy, showing off their moves and joking around between rounds. Among them was a man named Ramon, a well-known black belt in the area. He was tall, strong, and always loud, always laughing. Always making sure everyone knew when he had landed a good strike or knocked someone off balance. He liked attention. And he liked being the best. To many, he was the king of the gym. No doubt about it. But in the background, moving quietly like a shadow, was a man no one paid much attention to. His name was Darnell. And he was just the janitor. He was dressed in a faded gray hoodie and loose pants. Worn from years of hard work, his face was calm, quiet, unreadable. He didn't talk much. Just cleaned the mats, mopped the sweat off the floors, and stayed out of people's way. Most of the fighters didn't even know his name that day. Darnell was mopping the floor at the edge of the main training mat. He moved slowly and carefully, trying not to disturb the fighters who were sparring nearby. He was always like that, respectful, invisible, but his presence was still there. Always watching, always observing. Ramon had just finished a quick sparring match. He took off his gloves and walked around with his usual grin, bragging about how easily he handled his opponent. A few people clapped, others laughed. One of his friends made a joke, saying, "Looks like nobody here can challenge you anymore." Ramon chuckled, then suddenly looked over at Darnell, who was still mopping. In silence, a playful smirk spread across Ramon's face. "Hey," he called out loudly, "you there, with the mop? You ever fight?" The whole gym turned their heads, surprised. Some laughed quietly. Others just stared. Darnell stopped mopping and looked up. His eyes met Ramon's, calm and still. "I said," Ramon continued, still smiling, "you ever fight, man? Wanna spar just for fun?" It sounded like a joke, and maybe it was meant to be one. Ramon wasn't trying to be cruel, just playful, showing off in front of the crowd. After all, who would expect the janitor to say yes? But Darnell didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't even blink. He looked at Ramon, then slowly nodded. "Sure, if you want," he said. His voice was soft but steady. Like he wasn't joking at all. Now the gym really got quiet. The laughter stopped. A few people exchanged awkward glances. "Wait, is he serious?" Someone whispered. Ramon raised his eyebrows, but kept smiling. "All right, let's go then," he said. "Just a little light sparring. No big deal." Darnell walked over to the side, placed the mop against the wall, and removed his hoodie. His movements were slow and careful. But there was something in the way he moved, controlled, smooth, almost too smooth for a janitor. He stepped onto the mat, barefoot, rolled his shoulders, and loosened his arms. He didn't jump around or stretch. Like a show-off, he just stood there, balanced, breathing quietly, ready. Ramon put on his gloves again and stepped forward. "You sure you're good?" he asked, half smiling. "I don't want to hurt the cleaning crew." Darnell didn't answer. He just nodded again, calm as ever. The coach on the side, who had been watching all this, sighed and raised a hand. "All right, keep it light, no headshots." 2 minutes, he said. He looked at Darnell with a worried glance, but didn't say anything else. The round started. Ramon stepped forward, confident. Bouncing slightly on his feet, he threw a quick jab, nothing too serious. Just testing the waters. But what happened next made everyone blink. Darnell didn't block the jab. He didn't flinch either. He just tilted his head slightly. And the punch passed by like wind. Then, in the same breath, he stepped sideways and tapped Ramon on the ribs, fast, controlled, precise. Ramon stepped back, surprised. Okay, he muttered. Lucky move. He came in again, faster this time, throwing a few more punches. Still playful, but sharper. Now, Darnell moved like water, dodging each one, slipping between them, like he could see them before they happened. Then he gave another soft tap, this time to Ramon's shoulder. Again clean and smooth. Now the crowd was really watching. No one was laughing. No one was talking. Some jaws were even dropping. Ramon stopped smiling. He tightened his stance, raised his gloves properly. "All right," he said seriously. "Let's see what you really got." But the energy had already changed. The gym was no longer amused. They were confused, surprised, curious. Who was this quiet man with a mop? Why did he move like a professional? What was happening? The coach narrowed his eyes, watching Darnell more closely now. Something sparking in his memory. But no one could look away, and that was just the beginning. Asterisk, nobody moved. Not even the ones who had been talking just seconds before. Something had shifted in the gym, and everyone could feel it. Ramon stood in front of Darnell now, no longer smiling, no longer treating it like a game. He had just been touched twice by someone who was supposed to be invisible, a janitor. Not a fighter, yet somehow the strikes landed clean, like they were meant to. Ramon bounced on his heels again, faster this time, breathing deeper. He raised his hands higher and squared his stance. This time, he wasn't going to play around. This time, he was going to show the difference between a real black belt and a man with a mop. Darnell didn't change. He didn't flinch, didn't tense up. His arms were loose at his sides, feet planted like roots. His eyes were locked on Ramon, not angry, not afraid, just still. Like calm water before a storm, Ramon struck first. A sharp left jab straight toward Darnell's face. It came fast, but not fast enough. Darnell tilted again, just slightly, letting the fist pass harmlessly, and stepped in close, too close. A blur of motion followed 3 quick taps, one to the ribs, one to the shoulder, and one behind the knee. Not punches to hurt, but movements to control, to dominate without damage. Ramon stumbled back, breathing heavier. His eyes were wide now, not from pain, but from disbelief. "Yo, did you see that?" Someone whispered at the edge of the mat. Another guy nodded, slowly, mouth half open. No one could explain what they were seeing. Darnell was still quiet, still calm, but his movements had no hesitation, no waste. Every step was perfect, every breath timed. He wasn't showing off, he was simply showing what he knew. Ramon shook out his arms, frustration blooming in his chest. He had trained for years. He had faced dozens of fighters, strong ones, skilled ones, cocky ones too. But this was different. He couldn't read Darnell's rhythm, couldn't predict where he'd move. It was like fighting a shadow, one that struck with the edge of lightning and then vanished. He rushed in, low this time, trying to sweep Darnell's leg. But before he could even drop fully into the move, Darnell stepped sideways, light as air, and touched his back with the edge of his hand. It wasn't a hard hit, but it knocked Ramon slightly off balance again. The crowd watching was dead silent. Their eyes were all on the same thing now. Nobody cared that Darnell wore janitor clothes. Nobody was laughing anymore. The coach, standing near the wall, crossed his arms slowly, something odd flashing across his face. He had seen thousands of fighters, but Darnell, he moved like someone who didn't just train, but lived in the world of fighting, like it was part of who he was, not just something he did for fun. The 2-minute round wasn't even over, but it felt like an hour. Ramon backed up, breathing. Hard sweat rolling down his face now. His punches had been fast, sharp. Trained, and none of them had landed, not one. Meanwhile, Darnell had never even lifted his guard, yet every move counted. Ramon clenched his teeth and charged one last time. A blur of fists, more aggressive, more desperate, like he had something to prove. This time, Darnell didn't dodge, not completely. He leaned just enough to avoid the main blows, but let one glove graze his shoulder, It was the first time Ramon touched him, but in return, Darnell planted his foot and stepped into Ramon's space. His hand reached forward, not a punch, not a slap, but a smooth push to the chest, timed perfectly. And Ramon fell backwards onto the mat, not hurt, just completely off balance, like a dancer missing his step. The bell rang, 2 minutes done. The round was over. Darnell stepped back. Hands still down, breathing steady. Ramon sat up slowly, blinking. His face wasn't angry now, just confused, like he had been dropped into someone else's dream. People began to murmur. Soft voices carrying disbelief. Who the hell is this guy? That wasn't luck. He's a ghost. Ramon pulled off his gloves, then looked up at Darnell. His voice was quiet, the loud confidence gone. Where'd you learn that? Darnell gave a small shrug. A long time ago, he replied. Then he walked off the mat, picked up the mop again like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just made the gym's strongest man look like a beginner. Nobody spoke to Ramon for a while. Nobody teased Darnell either. The mood had shifted, and everyone knew it. They just didn't have the words for what they saw. And still, the coach stared at Darnell, the gears in his mind turning, trying to place a memory. A name, something long forgotten, because this janitor didn't just move like a fighter. He moved like someone who had once been great, someone who had been more than great, and the gym would never be the same again after that. The mop water hadn't even settled when someone whispered, "He's not just a janitor." The gym was still in a strange kind of silence. The kind where people look at each other, but no one dares to speak too loud. Ramon sat on the edge of the mat, staring at the floor like he had just seen a ghost. Maybe he had, in a way. He kept replaying it in his mind, every missed punch, every perfect step, every calm look on Darnell's face. That wasn't luck. That was control. That was mastery. In the corner, one of the younger fighters leaned over and asked his buddy, "Did anyone record that?" The buddy just shook his head, eyes wide. "No, man. I thought it was going to be a joke." Darnell, on the other hand, was back to cleaning. His mop swayed across the floor like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just made the strongest guy in the gym fall down without throwing a single real punch. He didn't look up, didn't explain. He just kept doing his job. But everyone's eyes followed him now. The coach finally stepped forward, a frown forming on his face. He walked over, slowly, and stood in front of Darnell. "Where'd you train?" he asked. Darnell paused, looked up, then simply said, "Here and there." It wasn't a real answer, but the tone made it clear he didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. The coach nodded once, but his eyes said something else. He was remembering. Something, like a puzzle piece, had just slid into place, but the full picture hadn't formed yet. Later that evening, when the gym was emptying out, Ramon stayed behind longer than usual. He sat on the bench, gloves on his lap, sipping water, still thinking. He wasn't angry, not even embarrassed. He was curious, deeply curious. He finally stood up and walked toward Darnell, who was folding towels near the supply closet. "Hey," Ramon said quietly. "I want to thank you." Darnell looked at him, calm as always. "For what?" "For the lesson," Ramon said. "You didn't have to go easy on me, but you did." Darnell gave the smallest smile. "You got fire, Ramon. You just don't know how to use it without burning yourself yet." It was such a strange thing to say, but it stuck in Ramon's head. He nodded slowly, then left the gym, already thinking about how to train differently the next day. But Darnell's words spread. The story of the quiet janitor who outclassed a black belt grew like wildfire, not just in the gym, but beyond it. People who hadn't seen it asked those who had. Rumors grew. Some people said he was a retired pro. Others whispered he used to fight underground. A few even believed he was some kind of military ghost trained but erased. Darnell never confirmed anything. He just kept working, never bragging, never explaining. He only spoke when someone asked something important. And when he did, it was always something strange but wise, the kind of words that made you think long after the conversation ended. One evening, a guy named Trent, new to the gym, walked in, cocky and loud. He'd heard about the janitor story, but didn't believe it. You all got worked by a cleaner. He laughed, must have been embarrassing. People warned him not to mock Darnell. But Trent didn't care. He was big, fast, trained in MMA. He challenged Darnell openly in front of everyone. "Come on, let's see what you got," he said. "I won't go easy on you." Darnell didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. He just looked at Trent for a few seconds and said, "You're not ready." The whole room went quiet again. That same tension filled the air, the kind that made even the heavy bags. "Stop swinging." Trent scoffed and said, "I think you're scared." Darnell set down the towel he was folding, walked over to the mat, and simply stood there. Hands behind his back. "Okay," he said softly. "1 minute, if you can touch me, I'll spar you properly." Trent grinned and stepped in fast, launching punch after punch, kicks, spins, full speed, but like before. Darnell didn't strike back, didn't even raise his hands. He just moved, leaned, stepped, shifted, like water slipping between cracks. Trent's attacks landed on nothing but air and frustration. By the end of the minute, Trent was red-faced, sweating and panting, and Darnell was still standing there, untouched, calm, not even breathing hard. The coach stopped the timer. "Enough," he said firmly, even though Trent looked like he wanted to keep going. Trent dropped his arms and backed away. Not angry now, just shocked. "Who are you?" he asked under his breath. Darnell didn't answer, just turned around and went back to folding the towel he had left behind. Like none of it mattered, but it did. To everyone in that gym, it mattered now, and the truth about who Darnell really was, that was only just beginning to come out. Asterisk, it started with a photo, an old one, tucked deep inside a drawer behind the front desk of the gym. The coach was cleaning up late one night after everyone had gone home. He was wiping down the counter when he accidentally knocked over a stack of old folders. They spilled onto the floor, and one manila folder cracked open. Inside was a faded photo, creases across the corners, dust on the surface. But even through the grain and fading, the face was clear. It was Darnell. Younger, cleaner cut, wearing a championship belt around his waist, sweat on his forehead, and a look in his eyes that screamed victory. He was standing between two men in suits, holding his hands up in triumph. The banner behind him read, "State Muay Thai Finals, -2005. The coach just stared at it. Fingers frozen in place, a name resurfacing. In his mind, like a whisper through time, Darnell Hayes. He muttered to himself, and suddenly, the memories rushed back. Not just a quiet man with a mop, but a legend. Once, for a short time. A name whispered among coaches. A prodigy that disappeared too soon. He didn't sleep much that night. Instead, he searched, flipping through old articles, online forums, fight records, and there it was. Fight after fight, win after win. A rise so fast it almost looked fake. Darnell had gone undefeated for 2 whole years, beating fighters who were older, stronger, more experienced. He had a style that coaches couldn't even teach like he. Saw times slower than the rest of them. But then the trail ended. Suddenly, no more fights, no interviews, no reason, no explanation. It was like he vanished, until now, the next morning. The coach walked into the gym before sunrise, and Darnell was already there, just like always. Mopping the front mats, headphones in, peaceful like nothing had ever changed. The coach waited until the mop stopped moving before speaking. "Why'd you disappear?" he asked quietly. Darnell pulled out one earbud and looked at him. His eyes didn't hold surprise, more like acceptance, like he'd been waiting for this question someday. He sat down on the edge of the mat and said, "Because life doesn't care how fast you punch when your family needs food more than you need medals." And just like that, the truth came out, not in a dramatic way, not with tears or shouting, but simply, quietly. Darnell had been on top of the world. And then one day, his younger sister had gotten sick. Bills piled up, his mother lost her job, and every time he won a fight, the money was gone before he even got home. He couldn't afford to chase glory. Not when real life knocked harder than any opponent ever did. So he stopped fighting, took whatever jobs he could get, and kept going. He became invisible, not because he failed, but because he sacrificed. And nobody claps for that. The coach didn't know what to say at first. His voice caught in his throat. "You could have been a champion." Darnell just smiled and replied, "I already was, for the people who needed me most." That day, things changed again at the gym, not with a big announcement, not with spotlights or headlines, but with respect, deep, silent, unshakable respect. The fighters didn't see him as the janitor anymore. And they didn't just see him as the mystery fighter who embarrassed a black belt either. Now they saw the whole man, the reason behind the silence, the strength beneath the calm. Some of the younger students started asking him questions after class, small ones at first. How do you stay balanced when dodging? How do you read someone's move before they make it? Darnell answered in pieces, teaching without calling it teaching, just sharing what he knew, guiding gently. The coach noticed something else too. Ramon started staying late, shadowboxing on his own, repeating movements Darnell had used, trying to understand. His arrogance was gone, replaced with curiosity and hunger, the kind that doesn't come from pride, but from true respect. One evening, a boy named Elias approached Darnell after cleaning up the pads. He was maybe 15, skinny, nervous, and always kept to himself. "Sir," he said, "can you maybe teach me how you move?" Darnell looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Come tomorrow morning," he said, "before the sun." Elias showed up at 5 a.m. sharp, and Darnell was already there, waiting with 2 old mats rolled out. That morning began something new, not loud, not public, but real, wordless, important. Darnell taught him how to breathe, how to feel the mat under his feet, how to move without rushing, and most of all, how to listen before striking. Soon, others began showing up too, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. And Darnell didn't turn anyone away. He didn't need a title. He didn't ask for money. He didn't wear a belt, but somehow, the best fighter in the gym was the one who never boasted and always held a mop in his hand. Some legends come back loud and proud, but Darnell returned with silence. And in that silence, he taught them all what true strength really looked like. It began with small things, quiet signs of change, not loud enough for outsiders to notice, but clear to the ones who trained there every day. The gym didn't feel the same anymore. The air had changed, not heavier, not lighter, just deeper, like everyone had started to breathe with more purpose. You could feel it in the way Ramon now moved slower, more focused. No more shouting after a lucky punch. No more showing off. He spent more time watching than talking, mimicking. Darnell's stance when he thought no one was looking, but Darnell always noticed. Even if he never said a word. One afternoon, 2 teens who had joined the gym recently, Milo and Jamal, were sparring a little too rough. They weren't listening to instructions, just trying to knock each other down. The coach raised his voice, but they didn't hear him. They were in their own world. Then Darnell walked over, towel in hand. He didn't shout, didn't scold. He simply stepped between them and handed each one the end of the towel. "Try pulling it together, not apart," he said. At first, they looked confused. Then Darnell told them to grip the towel and try to move in rhythm, pulling, pushing, sidestepping as one. Within minutes, they were moving in sync, not fighting, but flowing, sweat dripping, muscles burning. Yet not a single strike thrown, just connection, balance, trust. Afterward, they sat on the floor, breathing hard, laughing softly. And one of them whispered, "That was harder than sparring." Word of Darnell's quiet lessons began to spread. Not just inside the gym, but in the neighborhood. Some parents stopped by to ask if he offered classes. Some kids from rough blocks came and peeked through the glass, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was going on inside, but Darnell never advertised. Never posted videos, never asked for attention. If someone came with the right heart, he gave them time. If they came with ego, he sent them back out into the cold. Not with cruelty, but with truth, one cold morning. The coach found Darnell sitting on the steps outside the gym. Sipping from a thermos, the coach sat beside him without saying anything at first. They just watched the sunrise creep up the side. Of the buildings, the coach finally said, "This place feels different lately." "I don't think it's because of me." Darnell chuckled lightly. "It's because they're starting to see what matters," he said. "When you fight to be seen, you lose yourself. When you train to understand, you grow." The coach nodded, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was the student. That evening, something unexpected happened. Ramon stood before the class after training ended, hands slightly shaking. "I want to say something," he said, voice low. Everyone stopped and looked at him. He cleared his throat, then turned toward Darnell, who had just picked up a broom. "You taught me something I never got from 10 years of training," Ramon said. "I used to think strength was being the fastest or hitting the hardest, but you made me see strength in stillness." Darnell didn't smile, didn't speak. But the entire room clapped, not loud, not wild, but sincere, heartfelt, a real thank you. From that night on, people began calling him Coach D, even though he never asked for a title. The coach didn't mind at all. In fact, he encouraged it. "Some people earn belts," he told the fighters one day, "and some people become the belt. Darnell is the latter." The gym began changing in other ways too. Old students returned, drawn back by the whispers. New students came not for trophies, but for transformation. There were fewer fights over ego, more focus on breath and patience. People stopped rushing to win sparring rounds and started trying to learn from them instead. But not everyone was happy about the changes. One older member, Vance, who prided himself on his aggression, began growing cold. He thought the gym was going soft. "This isn't a therapy session," he complained once. "It's a fight club." One day, he challenged Darnell, not as a test, but as a show. "Let's see if the mop master still has bite," he sneered, cracking his knuckles. The gym went silent, everyone waiting to see if Darnell would say no. But Darnell looked at him calmly and said, "If you're ready to learn, I'll teach. If you're just here to bleed, I'll walk away." Vance laughed and said, "I'll learn." "All right, learn how to put you down." The coach sighed and set the timer. But deep down, everyone already knew what was going to happen. Vance charged like a bull, wild and heavy-handed, throwing wide punches, trying to break Darnell's calm. But Darnell didn't even move at first. He stood still until the very last second. Then leaned, sidestepped, tapped Vance on the hip, shoulder, neck like pressure points on a doll. Precise, silent. In 30 seconds, Vance was on the ground. Flat, blinking, not hurt, but undone. Like the fight had been taken out of him without a single real blow. Darnell helped him up gently and whispered, "Don't confuse noise with power." And again, the gym stood still, watching, learning, understanding something deeper than kicks and punches. Respect was no longer forced. It flowed through the walls like music, quiet but steady. Because when a man like Darnell enters your life, not with noise, Not with pride, but with wisdom wrapped in silence. You stop seeing the world the same way ever again. Asterisk. It began with a knock at the gym door long after hours. The lights were off, the rain was falling in steady taps on the windows. And most people had already gone home. The only two left inside were the coach, finishing some paperwork, and Darnell, who was quietly wiping down the locker room benches like he always did. Calm and unnoticed. The knock came again, harder this time. Not desperate, but urgent. The coach got up and opened the door slowly. Outside stood a girl, no older than 13, soaked to the bone. Her jacket was too big. Her shoes had holes in them, and she clutched a gym flyer like it was her last hope. She didn't say a word at first, just looked up with wide eyes. The kind that had already seen too much. I want to train, she finally whispered, voice shaking but firm. The coach blinked, caught off guard. We're closed, he said gently. But before he could finish, Darnell appeared behind him. Towel in hand, let her in, he said quietly. The girl stepped inside, dripping rain onto the mat. But her posture straightened, like stepping into the space already gave her strength. Darnell didn't ask her name, not yet. He handed her a clean towel and said, "First lesson, dry off. Second lesson, show up again tomorrow," and she did. The next morning, she was there before sunrise. Sitting on the steps in the same torn shoes, her name was Layla. And though she never said much about where she came from or what she'd been through, her eyes said enough. Something had broken her before she ever found this place, but she wasn't giving up. She was searching for something to hold on to. Darnell didn't treat her like a child. He didn't go easy, but he never pushed too hard either. He guided her like a whisper on water, slowly giving her strength she didn't know she had. Her punches were sloppy at first, but her heart was steady, and that was what mattered most to him. Others noticed too. Within a week, the regulars started staying a little longer to help her with drills. Milo gave her a pair of gloves he had outgrown. Elias lent her an old hoodie when hers got too wet to wear. Bit by bit, Layla became part of the gym, not because anyone said so, but because it happened naturally, the way real things do. Darnell taught her how to stand tall, even when scared. He didn't just teach her to fight, he showed her how not to run, how to breathe when the world felt too heavy, how to keep her hands up not just in the ring, but in life. One night, as she packed up her bag after class, she looked up at him and asked, "Why do you help people like me?" Darnell thought for a moment, then said, "Because someone once helped me when I didn't even ask." She nodded, not asking more. And that was enough. She understood. But just as Layla was rising, trouble began to brew again, not from within, but from the outside. A nearby gym, known for its brutal style and trash talk, had heard about the janitor coach making waves. They mocked the idea on social media, posted clips of themselves punching bags while shouting insults. Respect don't win fights, one of them said in a video. Pressure does. People laughed online, but those who trained under Darnell stayed silent. They didn't need to clap back because they had seen what real power looked like, what grace under pressure felt like, and they knew what Darnell could do without ever needing to raise his voice. Still, the mocking continued, and eventually, the rival gym sent one of their top fighters, an aggressive, undefeated heavyweight named Ricotta, the gym one evening. He walked in during training hours, uninvited, arms folded, smirk on his face. "I heard the mop guy runs this place," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm here to see if that's true." Darnell didn't react. He was helping Layla adjust her stance and simply nodded toward the edge of the mat. "You want to fight, or you want to learn?" he asked. Rico laughed. "I want to see if you're a myth or a man." The coach sighed but didn't stop it. He trusted Darnell, and so did everyone else now. Even Layla stepped back with wide eyes, her fists clenching nervously. Darnell walked to the mat slowly, took off his shoes, and bowed slightly, not out of weakness, but respect. Rico didn't return it, just raised his fists and came in hard, throwing wild, punishing hooks meant to crush, not test, not teach, but destroy. But Darnell didn't flinch. He didn't even move at first, then suddenly too fast for most to follow. He ducked under the swing, stepped inside, and tapped Rico on the collarbone. The bigger man stumbled back, blinking, unsure of what just happened. It kept going like that every attack Rico threw. Darnell answered with precision, not violence, and when the crowd watching grew tense, Darnell finally ended it one clean step, one palm to the chest. One moment of perfect timing. Rico dropped, not hurt, not injured, just defeated, confused, breathless. Looking up at the ceiling like it had taken something from him, Darnell offered a hand. Myth or man? He asked quietly. Rico took his hand and stood up, face red but eyes honest. Man, he admitted. All man, and from the edge of the mat, Layla watched everything. Her eyes shining not from fear anymore, but something stronger. Belief, because she had found her teacher, and no one, not loud mouths, not bigger fighters, not even the world could take that away. Sometimes, greatness doesn't announce itself, it waits in the background. Hidden beneath the rhythm of daily life, that's exactly where Darnell had always stayed. Until life itself began shining a light on him without permission. It happened the day the city sent a film crew to the gym. They were doing a short documentary about youth programs making a difference in hard neighborhoods. One of the city council members had heard whispers about a mysterious janitor turned mentor. They wanted footage interviews, maybe even a demonstration. Darnell didn't want any part of it. He kept saying, "Let the kids shine. I've had my time." But the coach, Ramon, and even Layla begged him to say yes. "People need to see what you do," Ramon said. "You saved more lives in silence than most do with a microphone." So he finally agreed, but only if the cameras focused on the students, not him. The crew arrived, set up lights and microphones, and began filming the daily grind of training. No glamour, no flash, just sweat, breath, discipline, and care. At one point, the camera caught Layla in the middle of a drill, her fists moving clean, her feet gliding with surprising balance. The interviewer asked her off camera, "Who taught you that?" She didn't even hesitate before saying, "Coach D, he taught me how to stand, not just how to hit." That line made it into the final cut of the video. And when the short documentary was uploaded, it didn't just get a few clicks, it went viral. People from all over the country saw the clip of Darnell gently correcting a boy's posture, then watching from the side with folded arms as the kid landed a clean strike for the first time. Comments poured in. Who is this guy? Why isn't he teaching at a pro gym? This man is a treasure. And suddenly, everyone wanted to meet him. News crews, talent scouts, even retired fighters started showing up at the gym, hoping to catch him in action. A few brought contracts. Some brought sponsorship deals. One rich promoter even offered Darnell a full scholarship fund if he'd come coach at his elite fight camp in another state. Darnell listened quietly to each offer, then turned them all down. "I'm not leaving this place," he said. "Not while it still needs me." One reporter asked him why he refused so many big opportunities. Darnell answered with a quiet smile, "Because I don't fight for money anymore. I fight to make sure these kids never have to fight alone." The gym, once just a small corner of a forgotten street, was now a beacon. Kids who used to skip school to hang out on street corners now showed up early, hoping to sweep the floor, just to earn a moment of Darnell's time. They stood straighter, listened closer, fought less, and trained harder, not to win medals, but to grow. But not all attention was good. The fame brought new pressure. A few online voices started questioning Darnell's past, asking why he had disappeared from the fight world. Some even accused him of hiding something. Layla overheard some of the older students talking about it in hushed tones. That night, after everyone had gone home, she waited behind and found Darnell. Sitting in the corner alone, she sat next to him, quiet for a moment, then asked, "Does it hurt when people say things that aren't true?" He looked at her, thoughtful. "Only if I believe I have to prove something to them." He said, "But I don't. I already know who I am, and so do you." And she nodded, because she did. But the pressure didn't go away. A local fight promoter came to the gym in person, this time not with money, but with a challenge. "There's a charity exhibition next month," he said. "No belts. No pressure, just a fight for the community. Everyone wants to see if the legend is real." Darnell stayed silent, staring at the mat under his feet. The coach stepped in, ready to decline for him, but Darnell raised a hand. "Who's the opponent?" he asked, calmly. The promoter grinned. "An old rival," he said, "retired too. But still sharp. He's been waiting to face you for over 15 years. For the first time in weeks, Darnell looked like he was thinking, not resisting. Not deflecting, just thinking. Later that night, as he walked Layla to the corner bus stop, she asked, "Are you gonna do it?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I don't need to fight for me, but maybe. It's time I fight for them, one last time." She smiled and reached into her backpack, pulling out an old hand wrap she'd fixed herself with black thread. "Then wear this," she said. "You taught me how to be strong. Now let us remind the world how strong you are, and for the first time in years." Darnell tightened his jaw, looked at the city lights blinking in the dark, and whispered, "One more round." Asterisk, nobody believed the old gym would hold a crowd that large, not even the coach. He stood near the front door, staring out at the line of people wrapping around the block, some holding signs, some carrying their kids, many wearing plain black shirts with the words "Coach D changed my life" written across the chest in white marker. They had come not for blood, not for sport, but for something far more rare. They came to see humility step into the ring, to witness the return of a man who had spent his strength on others for years, and had nothing left to prove, except perhaps to himself. Inside the gym, the lights were soft, not bright like stadiums, but warm and honest, like everything else Darnell had touched. The ring had been cleaned twice over, the mats scrubbed, the ropes checked. A folding chair sat in one corner with a worn towel draped over it, his chair, the same one he sat on after every long day of cleaning and quiet coaching. Darnell arrived through the back door just before the sun dipped completely. He wore no flashy robe, no logo, just his old black training pants and a sleeveless gray shirt. His hands were already wrapped, the same way he'd wrapped Layla's when she first came to him. The hand wrap she gave him, stitched in black thread, was on his right wrist. Just below the scar from an old fracture, people quieted as soon as he stepped into the room. Not out of fear, but reverence. Some of the younger fighters moved aside, just to clear a path for him. A few even bowed their heads, not because they were told to, but because it felt right. In the opposite corner stood his opponent, a broad-shouldered man named Reuben the Ox Mathis. A former rival from Darnell's past, Reuben had aged well, still powerful, still fierce. But his eyes held no pride tonight, only respect. He had been waiting years for this, not to settle a score, but to finally shake the hand of the man he never got to face when they were young and hungry. They touched gloves in the center of the ring. No trash talk, no posing, just one look, one nod. And the bell rang. At first it was slow, measured, to veterans moving like old dancers, testing, feeling the rhythm, learning each other again after so many years apart. Every punch thrown had purpose. Every dodge came with history. They weren't just fighting in the ring, they were revisiting a life that could have been, a path paused but not forgotten. The crowd barely made a sound. Even the children watched wide-eyed, as if they sensed they were witnessing something that would be remembered far longer than any trophy fight. In round 2, Ruben picked up the pace, testing Darnell's timing with quick combinations. But Darnell moved like water, the same way. He always had slipping, swaying, stepping into space like he'd rehearsed the fight in his mind 100 times before it even began. He didn't just defend. He spoke a language with his body. Every block, every counterstrike whispered, "I am still here." In round 3, something happened that no one expected. Darnell smiled. Just briefly, after landing a clean body shot. It wasn't smug, it wasn't proud. It was the smile of a man who had come home after a very long journey. Ruben smiled too, nodding mid-fight. "Still sharp," he said. Breathless but laughing, Darnell nodded back, still heavy, by round 4. Both men were soaked in sweat, breathing harder, but their eyes were still clear. Still locked in, the past, the silence. The years spent a whale of it boiled down to this moment, and neither one wanted to let it go too soon. But finally, in round 5, after a clean feint followed by a swift cross, Darnell stepped aside and caught Ruben off balance, not to hurt him, but to guide him down gently. His hand rested on Ruben's back as he dropped to one kneel like a teacher lowering a student. With respect, not power, the bell rang. And for a moment, no one moved. Then the crowd erupted. Not wild, not chaotic, but deep, powerful, real. It wasn't the sound of fans cheering a winner. It was the sound of people honoring a man who reminded them all what dignity looks like, even inside a ring. Ruben stood, shook Darnell's hand firmly, and said, "You waited all these years to fight like that. You should have come back sooner." Darnell grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "I never left." Later that night, as the gym emptied, Darnell sat on the edge of the ring with Layla beside him. Her head rested against his arm, and she looked up at him with a smile that held pride too big for words. "You did it," she whispered. He looked at her and said, "No, we did it. I just walked the path. But you reminded me where it was." The coach stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes misty. Ramon wiped a tear from his cheek and pretended it was sweat. Milo, Jamal, Elias, they all stayed a little longer, like they didn't want this night to end, because in that gym, under dim lights and between old ropes, something had been restored. Not just respect, not just pride, but a legend. A legend who mopped the floor, taught with silence, and won his final round not with fists, but with heart.